Hi everyone, this is the Intro YouTube assignment for CMSC 205, Systems Analysis and Design. And in this YouTube, what we're going to be doing is installing and using the software that we're going to be using throughout the course to create our project management, our systems analysis and design deliverables. And there are actually three software packages that we're going to be installing. First one is named Proj. And we're going to be using it to create our project management deliverables, to create things like Gantt charts and Pert charts. The second software package we're going to be installing is called Visual Paradigm, and we're going to be installing the Community Edition of this software package. We're going to be using it to create our systems analysis and design deliverables, things like class diagrams and sequence diagrams and entity relationship diagrams. Then we're going to be installing Microsoft Visual Web Developer 2010. And we're going to be using this software package for our systems design deliverables, things like user interface designs, validation rules, actual tables too, as a matter of fact. So we're going to be installing in this YouTube these three software packages. After we install each of them, we're going to use them a little bit to create an actual deliverable or two. At various points throughout the YouTube, I'm going to ask you to take screenshots of what you're doing. At those points, you're going to probably want to stop the YouTube, take the screenshot, save it somewhere, make sure that you have it saved, and then come back into the YouTube and proceed. You want to make sure that you have the screenshot saved because you're going to be submitting them as part of your deliverable for this course, for this YouTube, for the assignment. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start off with Proj, but actually before we can install Proj, we want to make sure that we have the Java Runtime environment installed on our computer. It's required for Proj's graphical user interface. So we're going to go out to this website. It's called www.java.com, and we're going to download and install the Java Runtime environment. So I'm going to click on the free Java download button. It's going to take me to this page where I'm going to agree and start the free download. And I'm going to be prompted to save its install executable. So I'm going to save it out in my downloads directory. Okay, and that was quick. It's saved. I'm going to go out into my downloads directory, and there it is. I'm going to run the install executable. Okay, and I'm going to click on Install. And this might take a little while, so bear with me. Okay, so it looks like the Java Runtime environment has successfully installed. So I'm going to close this window. Okay, and then you're going to be directed to this web page where you can verify the Java version. Though I do have to tell you, this page may or it may not work. If you want to, you can try to push the Verify Java version button. Okay, but I typically get this message: we are unable to verify if Java is currently installed, though I know it is installed. Okay, so I'm just going to warn you, if you're directed to this page, you can verify if you've installed the Java runtime environment, but you may be told they're unable to verify, and that's okay if you get that message. Don't panic. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the OpenProj download site. And on this site, what we're going to do, okay, this is the OpenProj. And by the way, all of these URLs that we're going out to download the software, they're available to you. As a matter of fact, the PowerPoint presentation that we were looking at the beginning of the YouTube is available to you out on the portal in our course shell in the class materials page. Okay, so you have all of these URLs available at your disposal right now. Okay, but this is the URL where we're going to go to download OpenProj. So on this page, you want to go down into the Files tab, and you want to scroll down a little bit, and you see an hyperlink for OpenProj binaries. You want to push on that hyperlink, and then you want to scroll down a little bit further, and what you want to do is you want to push on the 1.4 hyperlink. Okay, and that takes you to this page. Okay, and you want to scroll down to the OpenProj-1.4m.msi, and you want to click on that, and you're going to be prompted to save it. Give it just a few seconds. Okay, so now we're going to save the OpenProj MSI file. I'm going to save mine down into my downloads directory. Okay, and it looks like it's been saved, so I'm going to go out to my downloads directory, and there it is. So I'm going to run the installer, and I'm going to next through the install screens, and I'm going to install OpenProj. I don't want to necessarily view the README file right now. What I want to do is I want to start OpenProj. I want to launch it. So I want to make sure that the Launch OpenProj checkbox is checked, but I don't want to have the View README file checkbox checked, and I'm going to push Finish. And OpenProj starts up, and they give you a tip, okay, which you can disregard if you want to. You can push on Close. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to create a project in OpenProj. So I'm going to push the Create Project button, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it School, and we're going to push on OK. And OpenProj is going to change. It's going to look like this. And it's in this window where we're going to create a project management deliverable. It's referred to as a Gantt chart. And we're going to go into the details of what a Gantt chart is in class, but for now we just want to go through the steps of actually creating the Gantt chart to make sure that the software is working. Okay, so on the left hand side of OpenProj, what you can do, there are columns. It almost looks like a spreadsheet. What you can do is you can hide some of these columns. We're not going to be using them all. That first one we're not going to be using. We are going to be using the name column and the duration column. We're not going to be using the start column, so you can select it and then say hide. We're not going to be using the finish column, so you can select it too, do a right click, and then select hide. Okay, we're going to be using the predecessors column. Okay, we're not going to be using any of the other columns, but I'm just going to cover them up like that. Okay, so what we're going to be doing right now is we're going to be entering names for tasks in a project, and we're going to be specifying the duration of the task, and then we're going to be specifying predecessor tasks. Okay, so input this data as I'm inputting it, and let's create a Gantt chart using OpenProj. And you can change the width of these columns if you want to make them bigger, or if you want to make them smaller so that you can see things better. Make it a little bit bigger so that I can see all of the wording. Okay, so those are all of our tasks. Those are the names for all of our tasks, okay, and the duration for each of the tasks. Now, I also told you we were going to be using this predecessor column, which we haven't yet, but we will now. You probably noticed as you were inputting those tasks, you could see these bars appear over here on the right-hand side where you sort of have a calendar view, okay. Well, you're going to see those bars shift around a little bit now as we start inputting predecessor tasks for some of the other tasks. So if you go down to the third task for conduct interview with client, what we're going to do is we're going to input a 1 and then a semicolon and then a 2, which means that tasks 1 and 2 are predecessors for task 3. Okay, and we're going to keep doing that for the various tasks. Okay, so kind of interesting, you could see those bars shift. This is called a Gantt chart. I may have mentioned that, but just to mention it again, this is a Gantt chart. It shows the tasks in a project that have to be completed in a couple of different ways, you know, in a text-based way and then also in a graphical way, okay, over on the right-hand side. So this is a Gantt chart. What I'd like to ask you to do is take a screenshot of this Gantt chart and save the screenshot off somewhere. So take a screenshot of this and save it off somewhere. And make sure that you're saving this project. Do a file and then a save as. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save. And notice one thing, that my Open Proj deliverables that you create, they're going to be saved with a POD extension, .POD. Everything that you create in Open Proj is going to have a .POD extension. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that. I have a Chestnut Hill folder. I'm going to save that out there, okay, school.pod. Okay, so this is a Gantt chart. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push, there's buttons over on the left-hand side of the software, okay, and the second button or icon, whatever you want to call it, down from the top it says network. Okay, I want you to push that button and you get this view. It's the same project with all the same tasks and durations, but it's in a different view. Okay, and this is referred to as a Pert Cpm chart. Okay, and Open Proj actually generates it for you based upon all the information that you type into the Gantt chart, which is pretty nice. This is a Pert Cpm chart. I'd like to ask you to capture a screenshot of this screen now and save that off somewhere. Take a screenshot of this screen and save it off somewhere. So this is Open Proj. Okay, this is a software we're going to be using for our project management deliverables, and there are two primary deliverables. You're talking about project management. You're talking about Gantt charts and Pert Cpm charts. Okay, so that's Open Proj. Let's move on to Visual Paradigm now. So we're going to go out to the download site for Visual Paradigm, and again, we're going to be downloading the Community Edition, version 12. Okay, so we're going to start off the download process by pushing the Download Visual Paradigm button. Okay, and in a few seconds we're going to be prompted to save its install executable. So I'm going to save it down into my downloads directory, and this might take a couple of seconds, so please bear with me. Okay, so the install executable for Visual Paradigm is now downloaded. That did take a little while, but it's in my downloads directory. So I'm going to go out there, and here it is. I'm going to run it. Basically what I'm going to do in its install wizard is simply next through its series of screens, accepting the default settings, and I would recommend that you do that as well. Okay, so I'm going to click on the next button, accept the license agreement, and install Visual Paradigm. Okay, so we've installed Visual Paradigm, and we're going to start it up. So in the center of this last screen, you can see underneath Start the Installed Product, we're going to start up Visual Paradigm. I'm going to make sure that that radio button is checked and push Finish. And the Visual Paradigm software will start up momentarily. Okay, and this is what the software looks like. Now, you may not have reached this point. You may be at a screen right now that says thank you for installing Visual Paradigm Community Edition, and you're being prompted to input a name and an email address and then request an activation key. Well, you should do that. Input your name, input your email address, and request an activation key. What will happen at that point is Visual Paradigm will send you an email to that address. You can go open up the email, and inside of it will be the activation key that you then should plug into the visual paradigm software. After you plug in the activation key and you push on an activate button, then you should see a screen that looks something like this. And this is the software, and you should do that. Okay, so if you want to push pause on the YouTube, you can push pause and you can get the activation key, you can input it into visual paradigm, and then you can activate the software. Like I said, you should do that. It's going to take you a few seconds. Okay, but once you do that, then you'll be at a screen that looks like this, and this is the visual paradigm software. Okay, and it's in this software application where we're going to be creating our systems analysis and some of our systems design deliverables. Okay, so if we take a look at the software in this diagram navigator that's in the upper left hand corner underneath of UML, some of our systems analysis deliverables we're going to be creating are use case diagrams, class diagrams, and sequence diagrams. Okay. If I scroll down a little bit further under database modeling, some of our design deliverables that we'll be creating are entity relationship diagrams, and we're even going to be using visual paradigm to capture some of our requirements and document them. But what I'd like to do in this YouTube, okay, is use the software just to test it out. We're not going to create all of those deliverables. What I would like to do, though, is create a class diagram and a sequence diagram using the software. But first of all, what I want to do is I want to create a new project, okay, and we're going to call it school. Okay, we're going to create a blank project. Okay, and you can see underneath of the diagram navigator now our project is named school. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a class diagram. So if you select class diagram, highlight it, do a right click, we're going to select a new class diagram, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it school. So you can see my cursor was flashing in this area here. While it's flashing in that area, you type in the name school, and that's the name that will be given, okay, to the class diagram, school. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a class diagram that contains two classes, and we're going to create an association between the two classes. Okay, this large area on the right is the editor where you're going to be creating the actual diagram, and on its left side there are a bunch of buttons. These are buttons, okay, that you can use to add things to the diagram. For example, a class. There's a button for a class. There's a button for an association. We're going to be using those in just a few moments to create the diagram. Okay, and we're actually going to start off with the class. We're going to add a class. So what you want to do is you want to left click on the class button and drag your cursor with the left mouse button down, drag your cursor over into the editor, and then release the left mouse button, and there you have a class, and it should be flashing like this right now. And what we're going to type in it is the word advisor. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to give the class a couple of attributes. Okay, so we're going to select the class, do a right click, and say add attribute, and we're going to add an attribute for advisor. Oops, advisor ID. Okay, we're going to add another attribute for advisor last name. We're going to add another attribute for advisor first name. Okay, I guess I probably didn't do a very good job of explaining how to add those attributes. So you select the class, you do a right click, there's a pop-up that appears, and at the top of the pop-up there's a button for add. You want to select that. Then another pop-up appears, and at the top of that you want to select attribute, and then that adds the attribute to the class, and then you can name it. Okay, so here we have, and we can move this around. We can move it around in the editor. We can also make it bigger. If we want to make it bigger, we can resize it. Okay, so we have an advisor class. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add another class for student. So over where the buttons are on the left, do a left click over class, hold the left mouse button down and drag over into the editor, and then release it. And while the class is still flashing like that, we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it student. Okay, and we're going to add 3 attributes to the student class too: student ID, student last name, student first name. So we're going to go through those same steps. We're going to select the class, do a right click, select add, and then attribute. And we're going to add an attribute for student ID. You can go back if you want to and you can change these names. You can select them and then do a right click and say open specification. And this window opens up that says attribute specification, and there's a tab here called general. You can change the name of that student ID if you want to some other name. Okay, so if you haven't named it appropriately the first time, you can go back and you can change the name, okay, in this fashion. Okay, but we're going to add 2 more attributes, okay, for student last name, and another attribute for student first name. Okay, and we can make this class bigger too. We can make its width bigger, we can make its height bigger, we can move it around. Okay, so we have 2 classes now that we've added, an advisor class and a student class. Well, what we want to do now is we want to create an association between those 2 classes. They're related to one, they're associated with one another. So we want to create an association. So let's do that. Over on the left hand side there's a button for association. You want to push it and then let go of the button and place your cursor over the advisor class and do a left click. And then with the left mouse button down, drag your cursor over into the student class and then release the left mouse button. And you should have something that looks like this. This is an association and the cursor should be flashing excuse me, right in the middle of the association. And what you can do is you can give the association a name. And I'm going to name it has. Then what you can do is you can assign, it's called a multiplicity value, to an association. So if you select the association, you do a right click and you say open specification. In the association specification window, excuse me, in the general tab, you can associate a multiplicity value with the advisor, which we're going to do. We're going to say one advisor may have, underneath the student, we're going to change that specificity to 1 to many. And then push on OK. And then you can see that reflected in the class diagram. So what I'd like you to do right now is save this. Make sure you're saving the project. Okay, so you go up to File. I'll do that again. I did that a little too quickly. I want to go to File and then Save Project. And when you install Visual Paradigm, it sets up a folder for you where all of your projects will be saved. You can see mine is under C, Users, Susie, My Documents, and it's called VP Projects. Okay, VP Projects. So you want to save this Visual Paradigm file. And by the way, notice that the Visual Paradigm files are saved with the .vpp extension. Okay, you want to make sure you're saving it. So save it out there because you're going to be submitting this .vpp, this Visual Paradigm file, as one of the deliverables for the assignment. Okay, so you want to save the project, and then what I'd like to ask you to do is capture a screenshot of this, okay, of this class diagram. Save it off somewhere. Okay, then come back into Visual Paradigm, and what we're going to do next is we're going to create a sequence diagram. Okay, so underneath of UML diagrams, there's an option for sequence diagram. You want to select it, highlight it, do a right click, say New Sequence Diagram. Okay, and with your cursor flashing in the sequence diagram area there, you want to change its name. We're going to call it School 2. Okay, so you can see they're both named School. What we're going to do is we're going to create a sequence diagram. And a sequence diagram is kind of an odd diagram. It has what are referred to as lifelines and messages. And like I said, we're going to go into detail in class about all of these diagrams. Okay, but for now we're going to go through the steps of creating them just to make sure that the software is working and you're getting comfortable with the software. So in the editor at the bottom, and there's a tab for lifelines, and then there are these buttons below that. And the second button in, if you put your cursor over it, it says Create Lifeline. So we're going to push that button, You can see it created a lifeline up here. But now we have to specify some information for it. And what we're going to call this lifeline is advisor. We're going to give it a name of advisor. Its base classifier is going to be our advisor class that we just got done creating. And then we're going to create another lifeline. Its name is going to be student, and its base classifier is going to be that student class that we just created. Okay, so we have two lifelines. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create some messages back and forth between the two lifelines. Okay, so we were in the Lifelines tab. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Messages tab. And there are some buttons in this tab as well. The very first one is actually to create a message. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to push the Create Message button. And this message is actually going to go from, so underneath the From column, it's going to go from the student, okay, to the advisor. What the name is going to be is Submit Schedule. Okay, and it's going to go to the advisor, and its action type is going to be call. So the student lifeline sends a submit schedule message to an advisor, okay, and then the advisor sends a message back. So from the advisor back to the student, it's going to send an approve schedule message back. And its type is going to be a call as well. Okay, so you can see those messages, and you can move things around so that they're a little more readable. Okay, but we have two lifelines, an advisor and a student, and we have messages that are being sent back and forth between the two lifelines. And this is what a sequence diagram looks like, and it is a little bit odd the first time or the first few times you see one, but like I said, we're going to be talking about these diagrams a lot in class, and at that point it'll be a lot more clear. Okay, so make sure you save your project. Okay, make sure you save your project, and I'd like to ask you to get a screenshot of this sequence diagram. Okay, so we've installed Proj, and we've used it to create a Gantt chart and a Pert Cpm chart. We've installed Visual Paradigm, and we've used it to create a class diagram and a sequence diagram. The last software package that we're going to install is Microsoft's Visual Web Developer 2010. The Express Edition. It's where you're going to want to go out to the Visual Studio website that I included in the PowerPoint presentation. And it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. And you want to make sure that you're in the Visual Studio 2010 Express area of the page. Okay? You may have to scroll down a little bit. You want to make sure you're under Visual Studio 2010 Express. And then you want to open up the Visual Web Developer, okay, component. Okay, and it's this software that you're going to want to install. Okay, now I'm going to tell you, it takes a considerable amount of time to install this software package. Don't be surprised if it takes as long as an hour for it to install. Don't be alarmed, don't be scared. It could take a long time to install this software. Give yourself enough time to get it installed. I'm not going to install it now on this YouTube. We simply don't have enough time. I've already installed it on my laptop. But this is the page where you would go to install Visual Web Developer 2010 Express. So probably what you want to do at this point is stop the YouTube, install this software, and like I said, don't be alarmed if it takes a long time. Don't be alarmed if it takes even as long as an hour. Walk away, go take a break, go get something to eat, come back, and then we can finish off the YouTube. Okay, this is where you want to go. Now, I'm going to proceed on. I have Visual Web Developer installed. So I'm going to start it up. Okay, I'm going to go down to my root menu underneath of all programs. And then underneath of Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 Express, there is an option for Microsoft Visual Web Developer 2010. So I'm going to start up that software. And it started up pretty quickly, okay? And when you start up the software, it's probably not going to look like this the very first time. The very first time you start up the software, the only thing you might see is the start page, where you'll be able to create a new website or open up a website. Well, you're not even going to be able to open up a website because you haven't created any websites yet, but you will be able to start a new website. Okay, but you may not see this toolbox, and you may not see a solution explorer or a database explorer like I do. That's okay if you don't see them. I'm going to close them right now. I'm going to close all of them, the Solution Explorer, the Database Explorer. And really all I have right now is the Start page. Well, if you go up to View, the View drop-down, there is an option for Other Windows. And in that option, you can open up the toolbox. You can open that back up. So there's the toolbox. So if you don't immediately see it, that's okay. Don't panic. You can open it up. You can go to View, Other Windows. There's the toolbox. Okay, the other windows that we had open were the Solution Explorer. There's the Solution Explorer. It's back open. The other window that we had open was the Database Explorer, so let me open that up. They're all open again. So when you start up Visual Web Developer for the first time, you're probably not going to see all these windows. Don't panic. That's okay. You can open them. You go up to View, Other Windows, and then you're going to open them. Okay, but what we're going to be using Visual Web Developer for is to create our user interface designs. And our user interface designs are actually going to be in the form of web applications. Okay, we're not going to be really coding in this class. We're not going to be implementing any code. We can use the Visual Web Developer software by dragging and dropping things such that you can create a nice user interface for a website, you know, without actually implementing any or creating any code yourself. Okay, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a user interface for a website. Okay, so what I'd like you to do in the Start page where it says New Website, push that hyperlink, and it's going to bring you to a window that looks like this. Well, underneath of Installed Templates, you want to make sure Visual Basic is selected. In the center of this window, the New Website window, you want to make sure ASP.NET Empty Website is selected. And then that's really it. Okay, and this is where the website is going to be saved. Okay, for me it's going to be underneath of C, Users, Susie's, Documents, Visual Studio 2010, Websites, and it's going to be called Website 9. I've already created some websites. Yours is probably going to be called Website 1. Okay, but then you push on OK. Okay, and you should see something that looks similar to this. Okay, if you don't see this Properties window, don't panic. Okay, you can close. You can go up to View again, Other Windows, and there's the Properties window. You can open it up. Okay, so if you don't see all these windows, again, don't panic. Just go up to View, Other Windows, and open them up. Okay, but now we have a website that's been created but doesn't have any files in it. Okay, so what you want to do underneath of the Solution Explorer, you want to select the top folder and do a right click, and then from within the pop-up that appears, select Add New Item. And this window is going to open up Add New Item. You want to make sure Visual Basic is selected. And at the top, you want to make sure Web Form is selected. And then at the bottom, this is going to be the name of the web form. And for now, you can leave it as default.aspx. That's fine. We're probably, as we're creating our user interfaces in class, we're probably going to change that name to something else. But for purposes of this YouTube assignment, you can leave it as default. But then you're going to push Add. And you're going to see in the center of Visual Web Developer something that looks like this. This is HTML. The HTML that's included in this file that this item that we just added to our website, the default.aspx. This is the HTML for it. Well, we're not going to bother ourselves with the HTML, the source for it. Okay, down below the HTML there are buttons for Source, Split, and Design. I want you to push on the Design button. And it changes what you're looking at. You no longer see the HTML, okay? What you see is the actual HTML sort of like in a design view, a design mode. Okay, and here's where we're going to start like dragging and dropping things into our user interface, okay, to create a user interface design. Okay, with the cursor flashing in this called the body. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to insert a table. We're going to create a table. So you can go up to Table. There's a drop down for Table. Select Insert Table. And our table is going to have 3 rows and 2 columns. And that's it. We're not going to make any other changes. 3 rows and 2 columns. And then you push on OK. And inside of the body, now you can see that there is a table. Okay? It has 3 rows and 2 columns. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to start dragging and dropping user interface things like labels and buttons and text boxes into this table. Okay? So over in the toolbox, you should see an area that's labeled standard. You want to open that up. Mine was closed. You want to open it up. You want to click on it. And then you can see all of these different things, these user interface type things that you can drag and you can drop over into, well, we're going to drag and drop them into a table. Okay? And we're going to start off by dragging a label in the center. Okay, on the toolbox under standard, sort of in the center, there's a button for label. You want to do a left click, and you want to drag that over into the first row, the first column of your table, and then release the left mouse button, and there you have a label. It says label though. We don't want it to say label. So down in this properties window where it says text, and beside the word text it says label, you want to change that so it says username. And then you want to click maybe back over in the center area where you're designing your user interface. So we've just added a label to our user interface. It says username. We're going to do that again. We're going to drag over, this time what we're going to do is we're going to drag over another label into the first column of the second row. Okay, and it says label again. Well, we don't want it to say label, so down in the properties window where it says text, beside it it says label, we're going to change that to password. And then click back. So now we have 2 labels, username and password. Now you can see something kind of funky happened to our table. The first column got really, really large, and the second column got really, really small. So we can change that. We can drag, okay, the columns around and make them bigger or smaller. Okay. By the way, let's make sure that we're saving this project. Okay, let's save it. Okay, so let's not do it that way. What we're going to do, there are buttons at the top. We're going to do, there's one that says save default ASPX, and then it says save all. Let's just do a save all. So make sure you're saving as you're adding things to your user interface for this website. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag over some text boxes into the table. So let's do that. Click on the text box button and drag it over into the first row but the second column. Now we have a text box. And we can change some of its properties too. Okay, and we are. Over in the properties window, I want you to scroll down towards the bottom. There's a property for the width. We're going to change the width of the text box. We're going to make it so that it's 200 pixels. You see the text box got a little bit wider. Okay. Then we're going to add a second text box right beside the password. You can see we're creating a user interface, right? Okay. So we're going to change its properties too. We're going to change its width property. We're going to set it at 200 pixels. We're going to make it the same width as the top text box. Okay, so we've got 2 labels, 2 text boxes. Make sure you're saving everything. Now what we're going to do, and as a matter of fact, another property that we're going to change on the text box, and bear with me so that I can find it. Right, we're going to change its type from text. Nope, that's not the property, but give me a second. I will find it. Bear with me. There is a property that we can set. There it is, text mode. Right now it says single line, but we want to change that to password. Okay, we want to change that to password. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to drag a button over. So push on the button and drag it over into the second column, the bottom row of our table. And right now the button is named, it's not named, but it's the text on it says button. We're going to change that to login. So we've just created a user interface design for a login page of a website. Okay, we're not quite done yet. We can do some cool things here. What we're going to do is we're actually going to add some validation rules to this user interface design. We're going to make the username field a required field. So underneath the validation in the toolbox, below standard, below data, there's an area for validation. You want to open that up. There is a required field validator, and we want to select that, and we want to drag it over, and we want to place it beside the username text box. Right now its error message reads required field validator. We want to change that. What we want it to be is username is required. And there's some other cool things that we can change for that. We can change the color of the font in the properties window. The fore color, we can change that to red. Okay, and there's another important thing that we have to change in the properties window for this validator. We have to specify the control that it's going to validate. Okay, the control that it's going to validate is text box 1. Okay, let's do that again. Let's drag over another required field validator and place it beside the password text box. And you can, again, you can see that its error message reads required field validator. We don't want it to read that. So in the properties window, we're going to change that. We're going to change that so it reads password is required. And we're going to change its fore color so that it's red. And we also have to specify what control this validator is going to validate, and it's going to validate in the properties window. The control to validate property is going to be text box 2. Okay, and we're going to save that. Just make sure you save that. Now what I would like you to do is I would like you to take a screenshot of this screen and save it somewhere. Screenshot of this screen. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to run it. We're going to run, this is an actual website. It's not really going to do too much of anything, you know, at this point. And by the way, none of our websites really are going to do too much of anything. Again, remember, we're not going to really be implementing code. What the purpose of this is to design a user interface. Okay, so we're going to run it so that we can see what the user interface looks like. Now, when you run it, you're going to get this message that says debugging not enabled. That's okay. And it'll say, do you want to modify the web.config? Just say OK to this message. Okay, just click on OK. And what's going to happen is our website is going to start up in IE. It's going to start up in IE, and there you can see it. That's what we created. This is our user interface design for a login website. Okay, so right now if I push on the login button, you can see there are those validators that I added saying username is required, password is required. So if I enter a username and I click on login again, you can see that the validator went away, the error message went away. Okay, or if I type in a password and I click on login, you can see the password is required validator went away. Okay, but I don't have a username, so there's the username validator. Okay, but this is an example of a user interface design. Okay, and this is a type of things that we're going to be creating in class together for our user interface design. So I'd like you to capture a screenshot of this too. Okay, capture a screenshot of this and save it off somewhere. Okay, and then you can close IE. Okay, and go back into Visual Web Developer. But that concludes the YouTube. Okay, so hopefully at this point, and I know we weren't able to go through the steps together to install Visual Web Developer. So if you have any issues at all getting that software installed, don't hesitate to reach out to me. As a matter of fact, if you have any issues with any of the software getting it installed, don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, and we'll work through whatever issues that you've hit. Hopefully things went smoothly. Okay, but that concludes the YouTube. So now what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you upload to the portal all the screenshots that I asked you to create. Okay, you're going to wherever you saved I saved my school Open Proj project in my Chestnut Hill directory. So you're going to want to upload that Open Proj project, and we called it school.pod. You're going to submit that. Okay, if you go out into your VP projects folder, we created a school.vpp. You're going to want to upload it. That's another one of the deliverables. Okay, and then if you go back and into your Documents folder, into Visual Studio 2010 Express, into your websites, you're going to want to zip up, create a zip, send to compressed zip folder, your entire folder for the website that you just created. So for most everybody it's going to be website 1. For me it was website 9. But what you'll want to do is send that to a zip file and then upload the zip file to me. Okay, so I want the entire folder, okay, zipped up, and that's what you'll upload, okay, as part of this assignment. Okay, so thanks everybody. That concludes the YouTube.